Sahana Bhavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryang Karavavahai, Tejasvina Vadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishabhai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. A yajna, anything that you take an effort, a deliberate effort for yourself to help yourself. And this can be either a prayer or a meditation or some form of discipline. It is anything that's meant to be not so easy, because anything that provides you some benefits, it's not always going to be easy, but nevertheless, through time, it has a compounding effect and it will make you more discerning, more devotional. So whatever that is for you. So Krishna is outright pointing out the benefits of yajna, a spiritual practice, where you use your free will wisely and you make a decision and you say, though I'm busy, I need to take some time out after work or during work deliberately for yourself and make that time just for you, where no interruptions happen. And this is important because life today demands so much attention from us. So you got to take care of yourself. And in chapter 3, this word yajna, which for simplicity, means spiritual practice. But in chapter 3, he had a different definition of yajna. And he said the entire universe is a yajna. The entire universe is a sacrifice. What do you mean by this? Well, the entire universe is really a contribution to something else. Everything in the universe, anything you find in nature, in this world, the only way it survives and the only reason why it survives is because it's contributing to something else. That's why you're here too, because in some ways you're contributing to, knowingly or unknowingly, to some other people around you in your life, right? So the entire universe, he said, when I created this whole universe, I created with an intention that is going to be a network of contribution. That's amazing. That means there's no space for me, less for you. Even though that is how we go about things, still, I do for me so that I can also, in return, give for you. The bee does take the pollen, from the flower. It does take it for me, but I'm doing it also for you so that I can spread the seed and have, pollinate the flowers. So in this sense, the entire universe is made to be acknowledged, number one. So in chapter 3, he says, acknowledge, first and foremost, this whole universe is a network of causes intricately connected that I have created, and you are one of the characters and beings in this vast network who is also going to contribute so that you can evolve and survive in this life. If you fail to abide by this law, which you cannot negotiate with, then the laws are going to give you a certain kind of feedback. And that feedback is stiflement. You don't grow, you don't evolve, you feel like you're not really moving forward, you feel stuck, right? You feel like nothing's really happening for you. Like you're not really learning that much. Like, life is just passing by, time is passing by, but you're not really going along with the times. You feel like you're too much behind, that it's too late for you. It's all chances are gone. And then you say, no, this is because I'm not really aligned to the Krishna's laws, to the laws of the universe. And that is, I take deliberate action, knowing now that it's a network, to say, what place do I have in the small network? Not because I want to be part of this network, because I have no choice, because I'm already part of this network. So this means that the first question is, we have to be very clear. What place do I have in this world? What role do I play? Like, what is my usefulness in this world, right? In what way am I adding more value to this network? And this value doesn't have to be huge, like this grandiose thing, like, saving the forest and flying over to overseas and helping, refugees and so on. You just simply ask the question, where am I? In what environment am I found in? And within the context of that environment, what is my role do I play? the way that in some ways, right, contributes to my life, but also adds value to other people's life. And by doing this alone, you align yourself to this infallible network. And this network rewards you for doing that. How does it reward you? It rewards you with self-esteem. You say, I am a contributor, right? So I have nothing to be ashamed of. I can die in peace because I have spent my whole life in a sense of, right, giving more and also taking care of myself. And so he then says, knowing this very network, this cause-effect relationship, that this entire network is made of effects and causes. For every current effect that you're experiencing today, there's a past cause, right? So there's a cause-effect relationship. When you acknowledge this, for every effect that I'm experiencing, there's a preceding cause, not because it's random, because it is within the network, perfectly connected, without error, infallible, and there's no randomness punishment or randomness reward given me. It is perfectly connected to some preceding unseen cause that I do not recognize. So what I do then is I take this effect that's given to me in this moment and I make the most of it. I decide to respond slightly differently, slightly think about it in a different manner. So every effect that happens to you in life every day is your chance to respond slightly in a more refined, polished, deliberate manner. And that very deliberateness is what, according to Krishna, evolves you more, makes you more discerning, more intelligent, aligns you even more to the laws, and thus you become a wiser and wiser person on the basis of the effects that are occurring to you every day. So look at this, how different this is than the traditional New Age, which I respect and I am involved, many years. How they say it is, what they say in New Age is, just do, what you can, be a good person, and right, more for you, right? Also more for the world, but they do not bring a network. So you kind of end up being this isolated individual where it's just me for myself and for the world. And you don't really think wider. So what the Vedanta is showing you is this is our lovely way to live, but you have to start thinking beyond that. That it's not just me, the world, my family, this and that. It is a vast network where your action today actually affects the entire universe in some way. Your action, what you do, how you conduct yourself, is actually, because the whole thing is one network. It's like one wave in the ocean. If that wave crashes, its momentum is going to affect all the surrounding waves, and it's going to create a ripple effect. So your actions create a ripple effect across the entire universe. And you say, well, that's a big responsibility, but that makes me live a lot more deliberately, because I thought I can just sort of play around like I'm a child, all incidents are isolated and they don't go outwards, but they do. They ripple outwards. And all those rippling outwards, they somehow find themselves back to you in one life or the other. The ocean is a lovely example where we throw rubbish into the ocean and it's all down there. I don't see it. There's no rubbish. Everything's fine, but there's trillions of kilograms of trash in the oceans. And how does Ishvara respond one fine day, which is called karma? Well, it throws all of that back to us, right? And then we say, whoa, what happened? What have we done? But you don't realize you've lived many lives, and one of those contributors was you. So this is how we have to always receive what we have given back. What you give is what you receive. This is just the law of the universe. Thereby, this kind of attitude is called prasada buddhi. Prasada buddhi, where it's not just a attitude of gratitude. It's just a recognition that there is a cause-effect relationship within the infallible network of Ishvara. That's prasada buddhi. Thereby, this makes you a lot more discerning and deliberate and careful about what you say, when you say it, why are you saying it, what's the intention for saying it, and also being slightly more forgiving, right? When instead of having so many rigid rules about one's life. So one can, for example, say, I've done all I could. about saying what I could to this other person, whoever they are. Suppose it's not working out and they do not hear you out, right? So you've tried all you could. And then you have to say to yourself, okay, so this person is operating from a certain pressure, likes and dislikes, as we all are, right? They have certain orientations, how things should be and shouldn't be. And this builds a personality. The personality reinforces those orientations even more. So thereby, it's not really possible to sometimes get across to the other person. Then you say, okay, what will I do about this? There's only one choice because you're connected to this person. Then you have to say, I choose to put a boundary. What is a boundary? You have to decide at what capacity will I set that boundary? Will I never communicate with them again? Will I simply choose not to communicate first? I'll wait for them. Will I say that I will put a no communication for 1 year, but I will remove that block 1 year from now on. And if they do communicate with me, I will be open to reestablish that connection. Or you could say, this is a lifelong block. I will never communicate with you again. Or you could say, for now, I choose to put a block, but in 2 years from now, or whenever I feel that my emotions are not kind of, contaminating this relationship anymore, then I will unblock. And if they do communicate, I would deliberately just listen without responding, right, too emotionally. You can also say that. So either way, you have to recognize, what do I do with the current effect that I'm receiving right now? And therefore make the best of it, because that is your chance for growth. In verse 31, keeping in mind all these yajnas that Krishna has given between 26 and 30, he says these action-based yajnas will qualify the mumukshu, the spiritual seeker, to think clearly and thereby ascertain the highest knowledge. So once again, just pause there. I just said in chapter 3, the word yajna was different than in chapter 4. In chapter 3, the word yajna, Krishna framed it as the entire universe is a yajna. The entire universe is an act of contribution. Now in chapter 4, the term yajna is being redefined. He's saying the word yajna is a spiritual practice, which we talked about between verse 26 and 30, such as charity, right? Dravya, yoga, tapas. We talked about eating the right foods. These are all practices that you deliberately do. So we need to be careful here, because the word yajna changes based on the context. So performing these yajnas between 26 and 30, you're now relatively ready to ascertain the highest knowledge, which is spoken in verse 31. Yajna shishtamrta bhujaha yanti brahma sanatanam nayam lokostya yajnasya kutonyaf kurusattama.
Arjuna, the best among the Kurus, those who partake of the nectar, the result that is left over after the yajna, reach the eternal Brahman. For the one who does not perform yajna, nothing is gained in this world. How then can anything be gained in any other world?
So let's look at the first part. Those who partake of the nectar means the result. So those who partake of the result or the nectar that is left after this spiritual practice, after this yajna, those ones reach eternal Brahman. So again, yajna is a spiritual practice or a ritual or a sacrifice, or the entire universe is a yajna. We now talked about the context. But in the context of chapter 4, it is a spiritual discipline, right? Something that you do consistently to help yourself. And what yajna does is it makes you more empathetic towards yourself, a little bit more patient, more understanding, right? It brings those qualities that are natural to a human being. For instance, if you bite your tongue, have you ever bitten your tongue with your teeth? Isn't that annoying? Do you go and smash your teeth? get angry at your teeth now. No, you got compassion towards or empathy towards your teeth and the tongue, right? Because you know they're both part of you. They're not different from you. So that means you have a certain capacity for empathy in reference to who you believe yourself to be, the body and the mind. But when it comes to others, right, who tend to bite us a little bit, what do? We smash them verbally. Right? So it shows you that clearly our empathy is good with ourselves, but when it comes to extending it outwards, it's not that refined. But it can certainly be a little bit more refined. There's always more space for that. So the yajna is supposed to help you just bring a more kind of little bit more understanding, right? It doesn't have to be this grandiose compassion reaching out there and doing all these funny things. Just saying, for example, they're operating from pressure. Right? That's it. They're operating from a certain kind of relationship to parents and society and culture, and they're, just going through a hard time or whatever, and they're making a mistake. So that is enough to qualify as empathy for somebody else. And then you can let it go. You can still have a little bit of, whatever emotion, but that's going to calm down. In fact, not only will it help you in this life to build discipline, but also it will carry over in the next life. That's why some people get born and they are naturals at performing and being disciplined and having concentration, having great memory and being able to memorize easy, because there's a certain impression that you come over, and that's your advantage. So that advantage stays with you by engaging in yajna. You see, nobody really knows whether you will have videha mukti after the death of the body. Nobody. But if there's one thing that I know is that there's a carryover. And this carryover, what kind of a carryover do I want? An ineffective carryover? No, I want an effective carryover. And that effective carryover you gain through spiritual practices in this life. Okay? Now, then the verse says, those ones reach the eternal Brahman, the ones with yajna. If you look at the term in the verse, they go or reach the eternal Brahman. So these seekers, these mumukshus, they go to reach Brahman. And this language implies time, right? And space. They go somewhere to reach Brahman. So that means one fine day, I, who am not Brahman right now, will do something at some place in the future. And as a result of that involvement, a new condition will pass on to me, and thus I will now become Brahman, right? So this is what you think. Shankara, what he says is this word go is not to be taken literally. What it means is that it's a process, a journey of knowledge, where the knowledge of Brahman as Brahman, it is a journey that you undertake. And this journey, as far as the time it takes to assimilate the knowledge and remove the notions that are not keeping with what is, in that standpoint, it's a process, it's a journey, it's a arrival, it's a achievement, but it's not something that you gain as a new thing onto you. So the question then gets posed, I'm already Brahman right now, then why do I need to go through this journey? Why? Everything's already the whole, complete. My mind's already that. There's nothing other than Brahman here. Why am I learning this? Why do I have to go through all of this? Right? Can you relate to the question? It's a big question and it's a common one. Like, why don't I just chill out and relax because everything's already fine? Well, what we have is this story called the 10th man story. And this story says the way to resolve this paradox. Now, what's the paradox? On one hand, I'm Brahman. On the other hand, I have to arrive to Brahman. On one hand, I'm not different. There's no distance between me and Brahman. On the other hand, I have to arrive as if there is a distance. That's the paradox. So to resolve this paradox, we employ a 10th man story, which says there were 10 men, and the 10th man counted all of them. and he found there were only 9 because he left himself out. And he realized with grief, there's only 9. Now, why with grief? Because the 10 men, all of 10 men represent the whole. Imagine ordering a pizza or a cake and you get a slice left out. Imagine that, right? It's like, who took my slice away? It's not a big deal. It's just one slice, but it is so inappropriate that it's a bad deal. You don't want the entire pizza now because the whole pizza is a whole pizza. One small slice, I don't want the pizza anymore. You start to imagine now somebody must have, opened it in some, back alley, dark place with worms, everywhere. So you don't know what's going on now. So I don't want the pizza or a cake. Therefore, the person, all 10 men represent the whole. The whole. If there's one slight piece missing from the whole, I can't stand it. I'm now preoccupied with resolving the paradox. How is it possible? There's only 9. There were 10, there's only 9. What happened? And I look everywhere and I cannot find the 10th man. I spend years and years searching, lifetime searching, and I cannot find the whole, the 10th man. And I get really annoyed. And I start asking for people around until somebody comes over and says, wait, you, the one who's seeking the whole, is the whole. In that moment, the moment the 10th man hears this, what happens? Nothing. Nothing is added. Nothing is subtracted. Only knowledge of what is dawns upon the man. He realizes that from his standpoint, even though he was already the whole, he was not part, he was the whole, because the 10 represents the whole. He was the whole. But from his standpoint, was he the whole? No. Interesting, isn't it? From the standpoint of the whole, he was the whole. He was completely enlightened. He was not missing. He was not away. He was not an outcast. He was not different, or she, or it. But from his or her standpoint, he or she was as good as not the whole. And by that virtue, they got annoyed. And thereby, when the 10th man comes to know of the 10th man, what happens? At once, he becomes, as though becomes, the 10th man. When I come to know of the 10th man, I become the 10th man. Notice become. I don't become someone else, as in I become something that I wasn't already. I become what I already was. So this is very interesting 10th man story, because in a usual story, you have the knower and the known are two different things. Right? For example, the microbiologist knows about the microbes. The historian knows about history. The microbiologist doesn't become the microbe. The historian doesn't become the history. But in the 10th man story, what happens? The seeker, the knower, becomes the known, which is why we say the knower of the 10th man, of the whole, becomes the whole. You've heard the statement in the Upanishads. The knower of Brahman becomes Brahman. And thereby, you realize that the story is unique, and it's a beautiful story because it's the only story, or one of the few stories, where the knower doesn't gain something new, but that which is gained is the recognition that that was me that I was trying to gain. And thereby the notion that I was away from what I was seeking, that notion is destroyed. And thereby you are now the 10th man. You are the whole. Now we can look at this from a different standpoint. There's another story where the same principle, but different angle. Suppose that you were in a room and it's a dark room, and in the corner, there's a hulking, terrifying figure, and you freeze, cannot move. It's a scary sight to see. You don't know what to do. You're thinking now, what's going to happen to me? I'm dead. Where's this going to go? You start doing your last prayers, and your yajnas here and there, and you call your friend, here's my will, here's what to do with my money, and so on. What am I going to do next life? So you start having all these thoughts that are reflective of what you genuinely see because of darkness in the room. Until one moment, someone just happens to walk in and turn on the light. And in that moment, at once you see a coat hanging on the chair. In that moment, nothing is gained. Nothing is gained. The coat is not gained. The hulking figure simply disappeared at once. And when he disappeared, you realize nothing was added. As far as an addition, the most you can say is light got thrown on a situation which I didn't see, due to the lack of my own non-knowing. Light was thrown onto that, and knowledge of what is was revealed. Thereby, we can say in a different manner, what happened was I threw knowledge, self-knowledge, we call it Apara Vidya. I threw knowledge onto a matter which was not known to me due to my ignorance. And what took place? Self-knowledge. Paravidya. Aparavidya, self-knowledge, led to Paravidya, self-knowledge. Thereby, in that moment, nothing was added. Simply what is was revealed because of my own misapprehension. So in that same way, you experienced fear and you experienced non-certainty, uncertainty. In that same way, when you think about death, when you think about karma, karma is something that I have. I have a hulking figure, a thief. I have death, a thief. Why do you believe in death? Why do you believe in karma? Why do you believe that there is a life after this? Why do you believe you're a body? Why do you believe you have a mind? Why do you believe that you are limited? Because they're all notions arising from darkness, not knowing that there is only one non-dual reality where there's no other to punish me. There's nothing other than me. There's no karma. Oh, my prarabdha karma. The wise person will answer, what about my prarabdha karma? In two ways. Number one, they will say, yes, my dear, you have prarabdha karma. And this prarabdha karma is going to give you a certain amount of causes and makes your life what it is. But the second answer that the wise person says is, you fool, what prarabdha karma? This is what Viveka Chudamani says in one of the last verses that we've done in the retreat. You fool, this whole prarabdha karma, this whole thing of death, this whole thing of living, this whole thing of that I have another life to live, this is all arising out of your ignorance of seeing reality as a duality. There is me and there is something else, when in fact there's only I here, and there's no second to impute some kind of punishment or reward unto me. Thereby, what is non-duality? I am safe as I am already. There's no second thing here. There is no karma here to be given unto me. There is no body here to be given unto me. There's no mind here to be given unto me. These are just all concepts that you see as long as the darkness is still pervading your mind. When you remove that darkness, Brahman alone is. There's nothing other than you here. This is self-knowledge taking place. And thereby, these yajnas, they're not there to produce moksha. They're there to help you arrive to this knowledge so that your mind can understand this enough and just own up completely to who you are. Okay, so we have to understand the difference between yajna, the place of yajna, and the place of knowledge. Yajna, spiritual practice, is a means to an end. What's the end? Knowledge of who I am. Okay. And then the verse continues. It says, for the one who does not perform this yajna, nothing is gained. So, equally, the one who is given a body and a mind, which is meant to figure this out, they are committing suicide. I like this from Viveka Chudamani that we've done. They are committing suicide. What strong words by Adi Shankara. Let me say that again. If you're given this body and mind, and you're missing out on what is given to you, which is to figure out your truth, and you're missing out on that by deliberate will, and non-involvement in some higher teachings, not asking the right questions, choosing to live based on mere survival, it is as good as committing suicide. So we often have some, issue about suicide committal, but everyone's doing it, basically. Everyone's committing suicide, basically. Slow, deliberate suicide. So let those words, deeply penetrate your mind. And I love Shankara's direct literal meanings because he's very graphical in his descriptions. But here in the Gita, you're basically throwing your life away, okay? Because you're given the greatest chance once and for all. Use that chance to figure it out, and you can figure it out. Now, I just want to give a little disclaimer why the teaching sometimes criticizes, because he's saying here, those who do not perform yajna, for them, nothing is gained in this world, right? So it's kind of like a little bit of a criticism. So if you look at the scriptural pattern, whenever they bring a criticism, what always precedes it is a praise. Because he started out saying, those who partake in the nectar, they reach the eternal Brahman. So that means he's praising the spiritual seeker. He's saying that those who have taken on this journey to make it a little bit tough, it is a tough journey, and they're okay with that, and they choose to commit to that toughness, that mental training, using every chance to develop that discipline and to ascertain the knowledge firmly. Those who are doing that, good on them. You are not committing suicide. But those who are, right, choosing to, right, just engage in yajna after yajna, action after action, without recognizing it is a means to an end and not the end of itself, they are they're sort of in trouble. So what Krishna wants to do is build your dispassion. And I hope it's working. Dispassion towards the limitations of living. And what are some limitations of living? Well, it's life, right? Life itself is very short, and everyone wants to remain young. Everyone wants to remain healthy. Everyone wants to remain that innocent, unhurt child, before people started to break up with you, and then you learn all how people are, how women are, how men are. And then all those dreams start to go down the drain little by little. And you just sort of like become this cautious person, right? You started out as an innocent child, like so uplifted, motivated, so many possibilities are there. And then like you're 30 or 40 and you're like, yeah, it's possibilities, but just go on and do something, go watch TV or something. We don't do that anymore today, watch TV, but watch YouTube. And so you're like, well, what else is limited? Well, I was like so healthy and I could run 1,000,000 miles an hour. And now I need a chair. What happened? Okay. And you're like, oh, I wish I could just, be that person that I was. So it's limited. And then like your looks start to kind of go down and everything else along with it. But inside as a human being, you just wanted to retain, like you want to be like eternally youthful. So you start to see, well, this is how it is. There's no way around it. So I have to really use this time to figure it out. Krishna says, look, if you come back, you will come back. If not, that's fine. But either way, everyone eventually gets there. Now, when you say these words, you have to come back to reality, right? Because I don't want to leave you here completely like, disgusted towards the world or anything. The world is a lovely place, right? It's not, samsara doesn't just mean it's all gloomy and doomy. There's lots of, great rainbows and sunshine and, things you can slide down and, go up again. Of course, it takes effort, but it's wonderful here too. Meanwhile, recognize that it requires discipline and a certain amount of seriousness in this journey to sustain. So hopefully, I hope that everyone can go through this journey with that kind of attitude. That you do need commitment and you do need that level of devotion and keeping your eye on something bigger. So that's going to keep you, going upwards a long, long time. Therefore, when the scriptures employs criticism, it is not there to destroy something. It is simply to help you see things from two different angles. On one hand, the world is a lovely place where you can develop yourself, learn, contribute, you can find love, you can love God, you can devote. On the other hand, you need to see that this place is limited and your capacities are limited too. Therefore, look at both sides. Just like when you tell a child, do you first tell do you criticize the child, or do you first tell them something good about themselves, something that's positive? Yeah, you tell something that's positive, and then you follow up with the criticism. Without the positive, the criticism ends up stinging. It doesn't end up reforming. Thereby, scriptures employs the same principle. First, praise, and then follow with a criticism. Okay, now next verse, Krishna is going to remind why not to get caught up thinking that these yajnas are the highest purpose. So he's going to remind us what we're already saying. Verse 32. Evam bahuvidha yajnaha vitata brahmano mukhe karmajan vidhitan sarvan evam jnatva vimokshyase.
In this manner, many and varied religious principles are very elaborately mentioned in the words of the Veda. Understand them all to be born of karma and therefore anatman. Knowing thus, you will be liberated.
So Krishna is reminding us all these yajnas, or rituals or spiritual disciplines, they are in the category of karma, action. And there are three kinds of action. There is kayika, that's physical action. There's mental action, that means you close your eyes like japa or entertaining, contemplating, that's manasa. And there is oral, which is vachika. So physical actions or spiritual practices, oral spiritual practices, and mental spiritual practices. Physical spiritual practices, would someone give me an example of one?
Yoga.
Exactly, yoga asana. Pranayama, right? Oral,
Chanting.
chanting, what else? Japa, exactly. Okay. And manasa?
Say the japa in the mind also, and thinking good is another.
Meditation.
Yeah, so also
Meditation.
meditation, of course, contemplation, whether open eyes or closed eyes. So these three options are given to you. What's important, according to the verse, is there are actions. So they are in the category of action. And he says that every action is limited because it's done within a limited amount of time, right? 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes of action is only going to give you 15 minutes worth of benefits, right? And 1 hour of action is going to give you 1 hour worth of benefits. That's why they say, for example, in Kriya Yoga, which I was many years, and I still am, if you meditate if you do the Kriya, right, moving, that energy, for 15 minutes, you start out like that. And you feel, kind of composed and integrated afterwards. But then if you increase it to 1 hour, the benefits are much larger, right? And you say, feels great, so I'm going to increase it to 2 hours. And then 3 hours. You can do this easy, 3 hours, because it's very immersive, Kriya Yoga, certain practices. And then you find yourself like floating on water, right? Just walking and floating. It feels really good, actually. And you realize that the moment you stop, what happens to those benefits? Yeah, the contrast is so large that now you have to, right, sort of notice that I lost it, right? I need to go back. So you go in this circle of maintenance. You depend on action now. So all of actions, because action A is not action B is not action C, and action C is not action A nor B, action B is not action A nor action C is not action A, action B is not action C, and so on, right? Because they're all different actions, they can only give you different results. If I do action A, I'm missing out on the benefits of action B. And if I do action A for 10 minutes, I'm missing out on the benefits of action A for 30 minutes. So no matter how you look at it, when action is involved, it guarantees limited results because the action itself is limited. And it's going towards a limited individual. That's why you're doing action in the first place. So any action when you do, it's always preceded by one simple statement. I'm incomplete. Why would you do an action? You only do an action. Why would you eat? Like, why do you eat? Because I'm incomplete. I'm hungry. Like, why do you sort of, go and get educated about something? Because I'm incomplete. So therefore, I feel incomplete and I go and apply an action, fair and square. That has a transactional usefulness. However, Krishna is saying here, on a deeper level, when you continue doing action after action, you will get really good, but no doubt. But what you're really saying is, I'm incomplete and I need to do something to complete myself. Therefore, what I'm really trying to do is rid myself of this incomplete individual, and yet every action that I do reinforces the incompletion that I already feel in myself. So it's a self-defeating act. Can't get out of it. And so you say, well, now that I'm really good after exercising 1 year worth of action, now I can do even more. So let's do like even more action, right? Because I'm at that par now. So you go into the cycle of, you can't come out of it. For example, look at Arjuna. He was a man of action, wasn't he? Yeah, leadership, courage, archery skills, wealthy, was going left and right, traveling. Was a very busy guy. But he still narrated his dissatisfaction to Krishna. He says, help me out. My actions, my practice, 10 billion years of meditation hasn't really helped me out, right? 10 billion instruments that I've gotten and weapons hasn't helped me out. I've gotten it all. Help me out. So what does this say? Even if you have all the time and the strength to sustain those actions, you will come to the same conclusion. I want more. Why? Because you've only been reinforcing the very thing that you want to come out of, which is a sense of incompleteness. Okay. Now, what is the solution to this when it comes to action? Is it to stop doing action? No. When we say the word action, you have to make a distinction. What kind of actions do I continue? Noble and responsible actions. What kind of actions do I reduce as much as I can? Ignoble, irresponsible form of actions that do not conform to preserving the harmony of my life and those life around me. So therefore, we're not saying get rid of actions. We're just saying, on one hand, continue doing noble actions, but on the other hand, don't think that noble actions are the end of life. That is a trap. That's what everyone comes to recognize eventually. Thereby, what the verse is doing is it's clearly stating a distinction between what is bondage and what is liberation. For bondage, I see myself as the kartatvam, as a doer. I see the doer in the self. Thereby, the nature of life becomes, I need to do to feel complete, to be someone. Whereas for the wise person, the kartatvam, you know yourself to be free of this. The kartatvam status has been negated by your recognition that I'm free of the doer. The doer is an instrument endowed to me with abilities and talents dictated by my prarabdha karma, of course, by my skills and conditioning, and that instrument is to be taken care of, but it does not mean that that instrument is I. The activities, every activity, whether it is a positive, a noble, ugly, good, educated, uneducated, all those activities, none of them belong to you. They're not your activities. They are activities of your body, of the limbs that perform the activity. Look at this. This hand is lifting this cup. That's what this hand is doing now. It's lifting the cup. But then what do we say? I am lifting a cup. You see this? But the hand is lifting a cup. In fact, it's just basically the muscles, right, tightening, and it's lifting and going against gravity. That's all that's happening. So in other words, whatever does an action has to be recognized. It is an action performed by the instrument given to me. That instrument doesn't necessarily mean that I am that instrument. That instrument is I, but I am not that instrument, because everything is the self here. Therefore, we need to make a clear distinction Noble actions are necessary, but do not mistake noble actions or ignoble actions or any kind of actions as having any connection, any real connection to you. Bondage, you are as good as the doer. You are the person that's listening right now. That's bondage. What's listening right now? What's listening to these words? The body-mind is listening. Understand? In the presence of the body-mind, I'm illumining the body-mind, which is having an experience of listening to these words. Okay. Next verse. If karma or action cannot free you from bondage, what can? The answer is jnana yoga, self-knowledge. Verse 33. Shreyan dravyamayad yajnad. Jnana yajnav parantapa. Sarvam karma kilam partha. Jnane parisamapyate.
Arjuna, the scorcher of force, this discipline of knowledge is superior to religious disciplines performed within materials. Partha, Arjuna, all actions in its entirety gets resolved in knowledge.
Okay, so the verse says discipline of knowledge is superior to yajnas or religious disciplines, spiritual practices. It means the freedom that you're seeking is not found in any one particular action. There will never be an action, some mega action that you do one day that will suddenly produce that freedom that you're seeking. Nor is it found in a holistic person, being an integrated, intelligent, holistic person or intelligent. It's not going to be found there. What the Shastra says is you are already the whole. And that whole is your nature, right? Consciousness is your nature. And consciousness is the cause of the universe from which the forms arise, the forms are sustained by, and the forms resolve into. There's only one material cause in the universe, which is consciousness. And that consciousness is known to you as an unverbalized, unbroken I. You don't have to verbalize it. You don't have to theorize it. You just know that you are consciousness. That is the material cause of the universe. And this consciousness never takes on any attributes of anything that happens to your given body and mind. Whatever thoughts you have, or you have had, or you will have, those thoughts never passed on to you, consciousness, because there's only one consciousness. And if those thoughts affected consciousness, then everyone will be having your thoughts, because there's only one consciousness. Just like space, there's only one space. If space got contaminated, then the nature of space would, right, exhibit that everywhere. It would exhibit that in China, in India, in Australia, in outer space. So space always remains attributeless. In that same way, nothing has ever passed on to you. Think about this statement. Nothing has really ever, no quality have you ever inherited. You have never inherited badness or wisdom or foolishness. These are all qualities belonging to the instrument. Your nature is simply the light in the presence of whom the conditions of your body and mind are illumined all day long, all night long, all dream long. Okay? So what is that light in your experience that because of which every experience is known to be what it is? What is that light? If you call it the light, in quotes. That illumining principle. That principle in whom, or in the presence, because of which all changes from morning to evening are known to be as changes. What illumines the changes? What makes all changes in your life known for what they are? What makes these words right now clearly, distinctly known to be going on in this moment? What principle is in the presence of whom and because of which this class is known to be taking place? What is that principle?
Consciousness.
Consciousness. It's only one consciousness, which is there in the past, present, and future. And in the presence of that consciousness, It is because of that consciousness alone that your mind can be known to be changing from morning to evening. In fact, your mind goes through 60,000 plus minus changes per day on average. Because when it sees something, it literally shapes like that form. It sees something else, it shapes like that form. It looks into the distance, it sees that form. So your form of the mind, your mind changes in an unstoppable manner. And yet, in your experience, direct experience, there is a constant observer, the witness in the presence of whom the ongoing changes of the mind are sustained. They begin, they are sustained, and they go. Then the next modification of the mind, called vritti, is born, it's sustained, and it goes. And then the next modification is born, sustained, and it goes. So just to observe the constant, unstoppable changes shows you there must be the invariable presence, and that presence is what we call Atma, or the self. And this very self just happens to be the material cause of the universe. So where is this material cause of everything, from which everything arises and everything is, but it is free of what manifests? Where is this most known to you directly? In your buddhi. In your buddhi as evident amness, as that which needs no proof. Because just the fact that there are changes shows you there must be a subject which is free of those changes. Objects are changing. Mind is an object. It's changing. The fact that the object called the mind is changing shows me there must be a subject which is unchanging. That's just logic. Suppose you have a wave, and it's a wholesome wave, an attractive wave, a very deliberate and well-articulated wave. That wave need not be enlightened. You can have a very wholesome wave in the ocean, but that wave doesn't know its own truth as the water. And then you have another wave who is not so wholesome, who is not so well articulated, but that wave understands its truth and the truth of the entire ocean, which constitutes all the waves in the past, present, and future. That truth is myself in this moment. That is also possible. That's called a jnani wave, an enlightened wave. And that jnani wave recognizes there's no time or place in this ocean of forms, which is Ishvara, intelligence, the all-knowledge, constantly reorganizing itself. The organizations of the past does not mean it's the same organization of the present. And the organization of that knowledge and power is different from the organization of the future. So now, if you say, suppose you're speaking as a wave, and you say, I wonder what was there 50 million years ago. What are you going to find? More water. I wonder what's going to be there in the future when we're not around anymore, when they've got these 3,000 years from now. I wonder what's going to be there. What are you going to find there? More water. What are you going to find in this moment? More water. So now applying this to the reality, what are you going to find those times when we're no longer, when we were, we don't know what happened a million years ago? What are you going to find there? Nothing but rearrangement of knowledge. And that rearrangement of knowledge manifested the world, what we call a million years from now. That same knowledge and power is manifesting or reorganizing itself to manifest as the world that you're experiencing right now. So what are you going to find in this moment? Knowledge and power. And that knowledge and power, a million years from now, what are you going to find? Oh, I'm so curious about what's going to happen in the future. What are you for certain going to find? Reorganization of knowledge and power. So you can have two kinds of individuals. One of them, they're curious about everything. They want to study history. They want to study today. They want to study the future. It never ends. And you can have a very simple person who recognizes the truth that inheres through and through all forms, which is manifesting as those forms. And they look back in the past and they say, what was there, I wonder? And they say, nothing but the very thing that is obtaining right now, just in different permutations and combinations, which we call 2026. 2098, same knowledge and power in different organization, giving a different kind of world. So then what is there to know? except there's one Ishvara here, which is undergoing constant changes, which when we throw a new cause into the field, those changes themselves, right, become part of the whole, which affects the future. So what we're doing as individuals is we're constantly changing this knowledge and power. Don't think that God is the puppet, that we're the puppets. In fact, we are constantly changing knowledge and power. By your own choices, right now, if I drop, right, look, a pebble, and I drop it, by the laws that are permeating this world, they're going to pull the pebble down, and that pebble is going to, right, change. It's going to change from here to here. So my action has literally let this knowledge and power change from here to here to here to here to here to here, because the pebble itself is knowledge and power. The gravity itself is knowledge and power. The one who let go is knowledge and power. The laws which facilitated the pebble falling from here to here is knowledge and power. And the truth of that knowledge and power is consciousness, which is known to you as I am, I am, I am. What the journey of self-knowledge involves is owning up to your nature. What does owning up mean? It means first acknowledging that though you believe you're a karta, a doer, in actuality, you're an akarta, you're a non-doer. All activities belong to your body and mind. They do not belong to you. This is important. When I first acknowledge that I am in truth the akarta, then I have to say, what about this? Then I have to analyze, what about it that makes me a karta? Okay? What is a karta? A doer. Like when you do something. Someone, what do you think in your words is a karta for you? A doer.
Namarupa. Namarupa, a name and form in an entity, a transitional entity that's functioning to its purpose with competition around it, other entities.
Okay.
Doing the best it can do with
That's
whatever
fine.
instrument it's given.
Yeah, that's a good way. Competition with other entities. Okay. Silma?
I take everything personally.
Okay.
So it becomes very personal. If I take myself as doer, so whatever result will come is personal to me.
Okay.
Even my action will be very personal. So I'll just go yo-yo with whatever result I'll be having, instead of seeing it that, I'm just the witness to whatever's happening.
Okay, so it's taking it on board, and you're entangled with that action. So whatever action consequences they bring, it becomes my problem now because of that deep, intricate connection between myself and the doer. Anything else? What is a doer? Karta.
I do something because I want something.
Mm,
I'm looking for a result, and that's why I do an action.
okay, okay. And why do you do something? We discussed. Why do you want something?
Because I feel I'm incomplete. I'm looking for my completeness in those things.
Yeah, good. So in other words, a karta is always linked with a sense of incompleteness. That's what we establish. So thereby, to be a karta, to see myself a karta, I automatically have to assume that I am by nature incomplete. Again, we're not saying stop being a karta, because the body and the mind is not your creation. It is a creation of Ishvara. It's Ishvara's governed by Ishvara's laws. It's made to act. We just said when we started out, the whole universe is a yajna. Everything in the universe that's sentient is designed to contribute. So let your body contribute, because that's what it's made for. But the understanding is, despite the body contributing, it does not mean that I am doing any of that. I am just the witness, as Silma said, in the presence of whom the contribution is happening. Ashish?
I was going to say, Andre, can we say that karta is also a concept, a vritti, a thought?
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. So it is a very long thought, a waking thought. And you have to then ask, then where is that thought, that so-called doer thought, when you're not thinking about being a doer, right? When you're just relaxing, you're not thinking about mowing the grass or writing a book or helping a patient. Where is that Doer thought? It's not there. But you're still there. Your presence is still there. So thereby, the Doer thought is just a very solid, it's a very complete and convincing thought. And it is the only bondage that is. There's no other bondage than thinking you're a doer. Think about this. That's what bondage literally means. I am as good as the doer. There's no other bondage. Because the entire life is just centered on an individual designed to do. And when my identity is placed in that individual, then I am so entangled with that doer, and I just start to get anxiety and guilt from all of the things that I should have done, that I should have not done. So it becomes a big sort of this pressure. I have to now fix things. I have to, work things out. I have to get things right. And it's just a whole journey of action, action, action. Okay, so it is true that karta is a thought, but the thought itself is waning and changing, and sometimes there's no thought whatsoever.
And also, Andre, you do an action because you want to enjoy the benefits or the whatever comes out of it, right? So karta is there mainly because there is a bhokta, somebody who wants to enjoy or be in that feeling good factor. So he ends up doing action just to feel good all the time.
Good, good. So in the you could say another way is that the doer is always doing for the sake of, right, reaching the Anandamaya kosha, the kosha which is pleasant. That's what we all want in life. We always want to contact that happiness and experience that kind of, that joy of life, which isn't really who you are. It's just a taster of who you are, but it's very addictive for people. And so they will use the doer to try to get more of that ananda, that bliss. And the whole life will be sort of, attaining experiences to reach the Anandamaya kosha, to have drugs to reach the Anandamaya kosha. In fact, every single drug only does one thing. It really contacts the Anandamaya kosha. That's why drugs are so popular. That's why drugs sell themselves. In other words, Anandamaya kosha, it's the closest to your nature. Now, if everyone wants that Anandamaya kosha, what does that say? What does everyone want?
Happiness.
The self.
Eternal happiness.
The self, because the Anandamaya kosha is the closest to the self. It's like this. It's not the self, it's like the self. So the fact that everyone wants that, in fact, you just said it, Vijay, everyone does to enjoy. It proves that everyone's only ever looking for one self. And that self is called Brahman, what we're discussing here.
And that kosha, can we say, is that ahankara? That's what is really giving that?
No. Ahankara is the Vijnanamaya kosha. The Anandamaya kosha, because you can be, fully kind of just, ahankara is the doer, or we call it the karta. But you can be a doer without enjoying. You can just sort of just, whatever, just mowing the grass or clean the house. You're not really enjoying it. You're just doing it because it has to be done. But when you do it, yes, there is a little bit of that moda, right? Priya, that priyam in the Anandamaya, a little bit of that, clean house. So it's a good thing that we're doing it. So you can't really, if I think about it again, you can't really kind of do something unless there's some involvement of Anandamaya. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Even if it's mundane. Look at this. Actually, I remember reading a story. Why does a man carry on his head, this is India, a big bucket of apples for 5-10 kilometers, and he's in struggle, and you're saying, why would he be doing that if he's in struggle? And you say, well, he's doing it because, for happiness. And then you say, well, where's happiness on his face? It's a long walk. It's heavy on his head. And he says, no, he's looking for happiness when he gets the money. That's what's motivating him. So Anandamaya kosha is still motivating you in the future. And therefore, you will go through a great deal of struggle to attain a taster of who you are. Thereby, the whole world is only governed by one single kosha. That's the motivation. If the Anandamaya kosha was not there, people would not have any reason to live. Really. The only reason you really live is because you have one chance of tasting some joy, like a little bit of pleasantness in your life. And that pleasantness is the Anandamaya kosha. And that Anandamaya kosha, we say it's the closest to yourself, to who you are. Therefore, it shows you whether you deny Advaita or whether you're with Advaita, what you really want is Advaita. Because when you gain that object that you're seeking, what happens to your sense of seekinghood? What happens to the seeker? Is the seeker still there? Is the complainer still there? Is the wanter still there? Nah, that wanter resolves temporarily, and all sense of complaints that I need more and this is not good enough and this has to happen for me to be happy, all those narratives are overshadowed, and you are in touch temporarily with this Anandamaya Kosha until another thought, that's called your causal body, arises with a vasana and says, yeah, but this needs to be a little bit like that. It needs to be different. And that overrides, once again, it creates a ripple in your mind, and that ripple in the mind no longer is open for Anandamaya Kosha. And therefore, you go back to square one. And now again, I chase for the Anandamaya Kosha. Like this, I'm stuck. And those people who think that happiness is the end of life, what do? They think the happiness, the aim of life is happiness. That's an error. Because happiness itself comes and goes. Therefore, if you were happiness, and when happiness goes, you would go along with it. But no, happiness has parts. Sometimes you feel a little bit happy, more happy, extra happy, but you remain this witnessing presence irrespective of the levels of happiness. And happiness itself has 3 gradations: Priya, Moda, Pramoda. When one of them is there, the other is not there. When the third one is there, the first one is not there. But I am there witnessing the presence of all of them, obtaining as a vritti in the mind. Thereby, you cannot be happiness too. Because if happiness or love was who you are, then you would be constantly intrinsically happy no matter what. You will be loving no matter what. But we don't experience that all the time. We are able to experience a little bit of joy, a little bit of dislike, a little bit of skepticism. That means I must be thus free of happiness, skepticism, and joy. That's why we say that this consciousness is Shuddham. It's completely pure and attribute free. No attributes stick onto consciousness. How do you know that? Because no attribute ever sticks with you in deep sleep. If an attribute of happiness was your nature, as I said, you would constantly have just an object of happiness, even in hatred, even in, times of disappointment. But you don't have that. You have disappointment, and then there's happiness, and then there's curiosity, and then there's peace. In fact, not everyone wants happiness. Some people just want contentment, right? Yeah. Therefore, Anandamaya Kosha, don't mistake yourself and say you are happiness. Happiness is a taster of who you are, but you are also free of happiness. You're much more than happiness. So now if you redefine what it means to pursue life, is it a journey of happiness? There was a movie called The Pursuit of Happiness. Is it a pursuit of happiness? No. It's a pursuit of discovering my nature to be free of happiness also. Does that sound disappointing or something you want to cheer? So Vedanta really breaks these notions that we're seeing in this world, right? Oh, I thought it was all about happiness. No, I don't want happiness either. I'm much more than happiness. I don't want peace either. I'm much more than peace. I don't want love, nor death, nor life, nor anything. They're all attributes, manifestation of Maya Shakti.
Yeah, can I present a different viewpoint for Kartrutva Bhava? In the sense like, Karta, simply put, a sense of ownership in terms of like whatever the action that is being performed. So it has got nothing to do with the results. I mean, it may drive someone towards it, but not every action is towards that. So digestion happens, but I don't have the sense of ownership of it. So I'm not digesting. Digestion happens. So there is no Kartrutva Bhava in there. But if I'm hungry and I need to eat, and now I go and I seek something to eat. Now I am taking action, right? With an ownership, right? I need to do this. So that is where actually for me, Kartrutva Bhava is what really differentiates whether someone has the feeling of they being the Karta or not. The ownership on it, that's what is Karta. Without ownership, it is not like there's no Karta.
I have a confusion in my mind. When we talk of Brahman, we say Brahman is a Karta and a Bhokta. It neither does anything nor does it enjoy anything. It is impassive. On the other hand, when we are saying that I am not the doer, if I am not the doer, if the Brahman is not the doer, then who is the doer?
Yeah, so the simple example is of a dream. The dreamer, right, the person in the bed, is not really doing the whole dream. In the presence of my mind, which is a capacity in me, the mind builds characters and the world. And by the laws that it sets up, there's a certain, right, engagement between different characters. So it's not really you who's sleeping in a bed who's doing the dream. It is your own capacity which is doing the dream. So now the question, who is the doer? It is Maya Shakti. It's Maya Shakti by the help of your own free will. So you choose to, for example, drop a pebble, and Maya Shakti's own laws facilitate that pebble falling down. So therefore, both are involved for the doer to occur. My free will, and two, Maya Shakti, and which facilitates, right, the decisions taking effect.
Just a reflection on what we discussed just before this question, that we are, aren't we, we are actually talking about action and karma. So when we are talking about karma, which yields punya and papa, then in that sense, it needs to have a will. If it's based off your, if there is a will involved, if you make a choice, then it becomes a karma. But things like breathing, that's like prakriti. It's action. It's going to happen.
Point is that the whole world is facilitated by what I do now is going to have some effect in the future. One breath is going to lead to the next breath. Next breath will lead, 10 breaths later. At how much punya papam I receive, that depends on how much I'm breathing. Sometimes I can breathe shallow, I can breathe full, I can do some breathing exercises. So everything has punya and papam. Breath has punya papam. How? Because if I don't breathe, then I'll be tired. If I breathe full, I'll be a little bit more energized. Okay, so we have to just, from a bigger picture, the whole cause-effect relationship applies to everything. There's not one exception to which it doesn't apply. Even if it's beyond your free will, it still has some punya papam, although not as dramatic as if you start to do these breathing exercises and breathe deeply, and then 10 minutes later, you are buzzing. If you don't do that, you're still kind of buzzing, but not so much. Either way, it is a cause-effect relationship. Would you like?
Andre, I do have, sorry, one more question. Can I ask now?
Yeah, sure.
So we were talking about deep sleep. This is the question like I was thinking about the other day. Like when you're in sleep, there is no ego, deep sleep, no ego, no ahankara, no mind. Then, and we have heard in various lectures, like they give this example of when you wake up, you say, oh, I slept peacefully. But I was thinking, how is my ego making that claim that I slept peacefully? Because there is no ego, and I cannot say consciousness, because consciousness is just there. It's a witness. It's in the presence of it, everything comes into light. But when there is no mind, and when I wake up from deep sleep, like how is that I'm able to claim that is my ego which is claiming it?
Sure, because
Not the consciousness.
Because in deep sleep, they say that the subtle body, the sukma sharira, is completely resolved. It's not. There's this abhava vritti. There's a small memory still active during sleep, and that memory records nothing during deep sleep. And that memory you access upon the waking. And then you say, because it recorded nothing, I can now infer that there was deep sleep. So thereby, and also not only infer, but you can just tell, you can, by your presence of restfulness, you can say, I slept. So it's not memory gets accessed, and that memory lets you know.
So it's again a vritti, but it's a vritti then. Abhava vritti, but a vritti.
That memory, which is blank, that gets accessed, and then you say, I slept.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Otherwise, if no memory was there, right, consciousness cannot remember. If the mind was completely resolved, there will be no way to tell that I either dreamt or slept or any of that in between. So there has to be something still active to tell me with confidence that not only did I dream, but I also had that restful place that you call deep sleep. So it says discipline of knowledge is superior to religious disciplines. Okay, now this word superior, shreyan, It sounds like Vedanta sometimes is dismissing action, right? Because knowledge is superior to religious disciplines. It's not. The reason why the word Shreyan, or superior or better than, is used is because action and knowledge are two different orders of the same reality. If I say to you, it is better to stay married, it's better to be married than to be single, or I say to you, it's better to be single than be married, that is in the same order of reality. That's a matter of action. But if I say to you, action begins and it takes effort, whereas knowledge of what is effortless and it never begins. That's two different things altogether. Action begins and it takes effort and it gives you limited results. Whereas knowledge of what is, of the limitless reality, you gain that which is limitless. That means it includes the benefits of all actions simultaneously, and it is effortless. You don't have to keep on doing something to keep on gaining the benefits. The knowledge of who you are itself is the final benefit, because what you're gaining is that which has no higher. You cannot say, oh, what more can you gain than limitless? Tell me. Can you gain more than limitless, than the infinite? Oh, I'm going to gain 2 times infinite. No, this is child speak now. Infinite means infinite. There's no boundaries. Therefore, you cannot beat that which is giving you everything. For that reason, it is better or superior than action. And then the verse continues. It says, all actions in its entirety get resolved in knowledge. All actions get resolved in knowledge. That's what I just said before, right? The benefits of all actions get resolved when knowledge of who you are takes place. So at once, not slowly. So this means that at once, when you realize who you are, when that shift happens from the individual with karma, with punya and papam, to that which is transcending the punya papam, which is transcending the thoughts, at once you gain the limitless. And what I want to mean by at once is, for example, suppose the moment the wave changes its identity from the wave to the water, how long is that? How long does that take? Is that like a slow thing where I'm still a little bit of wave, but I'm a little bit more water now? Okay, I'm less wave, more water. Or it's just an instant shift at once. Therefore, moksha is not this gradual, like I'm 5% enlightened. Tomorrow, I'm 20% enlightened. That would be kind of weird. Now, as far as progress, we call that growing clarity. We call that the mind is building itself, developing itself to at once capture the reality fully. Another example is, suppose you are dreaming and it's a terrible dream and you wake up from a nightmare. What happens? At once you discover everything that person was struggling and achieving. At once, that was me, but I'm not that character. That character was depending on my presence, but I was free of that character all along. Or you take an example of iron filings. Maybe a silly example. Iron filings hanging down on a magnet, and then you turn off the magnet, and what happens? The iron filings fall off. So now those iron filings is all of your karma, right? All of those things that are yet to sting you in the future. You got a lot of them. And the magnet is your notion that you're the body-mind. So the moment you negate that notion through knowledge, what happens to all those karma that are going to head your way? They fall off. They no longer are yours. So at once. Okay, now how to gain this knowledge? This will be in the next verse, next week. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.